Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Chef Hamill here. I am going to demonstrate to you how to properly dice an onion. Now this is a skill my students have already learned, but it's one that sometimes needs a little bit refreshing. And this is a skill that I think everyone should learn for every home cook and anyone that enjoys cooking, because the more evenly you are able to cut an onion, the more evenly your food is going to cook. So, first thing we are going to do is peel off any of these extra layers of skin that are easily able to be pulled off. I have a little scrap bowl on the side that I like to put all my scraps in. And the next thing we are going to do is we are going to cut off the stem end and the root end. When cutting an onion, you never ever cut it through the equator unless you're actually making onion rings. Every other time you're going to cut an onion, you're going to cut it through the North Pole and the South Pole, so stem end to root end. So first thing we need to do is trim off a little bit of the root end, a little bit of the stem end, put that in our scrap bowl. And then what we need to do is cut from the top to the bottom, or the North Pole to the South Pole. And from this point, it will be a lot easier for us to peel the skin off of our onion. If you try to peel the skin off prior to cutting into it, it's going to be very difficult. So we'll take a moment and peel all this off. This is honestly probably one of the skills my students dislike the most, of course, because onions make them cry. But we have a lot of fun in class and I try to make a little joke out of it. And let's face it, anytime anybody cuts an onion, they cry. So we'll peel all this skin off. Make sure our cutting board is clear. And then we're going to do one half at a time. So what we want to do is actually follow the natural lines that are in the onion. That's gonna kind of be our little guide. So we're gonna place our onion with the flat side down. And we're going to cut lines into our onion without cutting all the way through. So if you can see here, I am cutting through my onion without cutting entirely through to the other side, keeping the onion intact. Now, depending on how thin or how thick you cut these strips is going to determine how big or small of a dice that you end up with. But as you can see, it is still intact on the bottom. So we're gonna place it down on our cutting board and turn it a quarter turn so that our lines are facing horizontal. Now we're going to take our knife and cut down, and our dice will naturally fall apart. And depending upon, of course, how where you put your knife is going to depend on how big or how small your dice ends up. Make sure that your fingers that are holding the onion are curled back. You don't want to accidentally trim off some of your finger. That is not fun. And if you don't feel safe cutting that last piece, you can always put it in your scrap bin and we can use this at a later time to make a homemade chicken stock. So we have our dice. And if there's any pieces that don't fall apart or a little bit larger, you can always go back and cut them, but generally they should all be about the same size. So we'll do our other half. So remember, we're going to place it down on the flat side, and we're going to take our knife and cut our strips. Careful not to cut all the way through. Sometimes the end piece gets cut through a little, and that's okay. Let me make sure we turn our onion, and we're going to cut down to make our perfect dice. Put that in our scrap bin, and there you go. We have a perfect dice. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments below, and I hope this is helpful to you. Make sure that since you are home, you are practicing, and I bet your food and your cooking is going to get infinitely better from having a perfectly diced onion in your dishes. Thank you for tuning in. See you soon.